Hey guys, this is Healthy Life Designing. I am Darian. Today we have such a special show for you guys today. We have joining us Chef Barry. She has traveled all over the world. She is such a special person. Her gift of sharing how she creates not only really great meals to eat, but charcuterie boards, and I might not even be pronouncing it correctly, but that is why the chef is in the house, my house, today to share all of her great information and how you can put together your own board as well. So stick around because Chef Barry will be joining us when we come back.
Dagger Law has been part of the Lancaster community for more than 110 years. This is where we live and work. You'll see us at festivals, sporting events, and all around town. We consider our clients as friends, and we walk alongside you through challenging times. Whether you're a growing business, a changing family, facing litigation, planning your future, or dealing with land issues, we're right here. We are local. We are trusted. We are experienced. Dagger Law.
Hey guys, we are back with the amazing Chef Barry. Thank you so much for making the trip today, Chef.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for our board. I'm excited for our conversation, so thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So when did this journey start for you?
So I started cooking in professional kitchens. I was really small. I started off at my church's kitchen. My grandmother's she worked in the kitchen, and we also had a group of Eastern European women that would make pierogies, and they would allow me to assist them, and they would sell the pierogies, and my grandmother was a caterer, so I had professional experience very, very young. And Then I thought I was going to be a psychologist and ended up back in the culinary world, so it's been a while.
Right. So how young were you, do you think?
I was probably 9 when I first started to have a paying position. Before then, I was just a volunteer that was there every single week.
Wow, that's pretty great to be that young and to have that opportunity.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I looking back, I don't think that I realized that I was actually getting into a professional space. I just thought man, people are letting me cook food, and I love cooking food.
Right.
So it felt great.
And you've got to travel quite a bit.
I have.
All over. Can you talk about that?
So I actually started traveling for work. So I'd gone to the Bahamas, but then my first international, across the pond trip was to London. And I had a 21-day stint there. I was doing a pop-up with a friend. That the pop-up kind of fell through, but I ended up still working while I was in London with another friend who we were doing a private event for someone that's a Google exec, which I didn't even understand how that all worked out, but it did, and it was just an amazing experience. And then I went on a trip to Bali. They loved my energy, and they were like, hey, you should come back and host all the time. So I ended up traveling and working for the most part, but being able to see the world and do what I love. I love to host and be around people and experience just so many different ways to see the world. Not just from the view on this side of the world, but just the view from multiple arenas. From the standpoint of working, from being on vacation, from having fun, but also having responsibility and being able to meet groups while doing it.
Well, and I'm sure that you've taken so many different components of these different cultures and you've been able to kind of personalize it.
Absolutely. Especially because I work in food when I'm stateside, I've been able to go beyond just my classic French training and now incorporate elements from like when I was in Ghana or Kenya, be able to incorporate that in my food, or when I was in Indonesia, be able to incorporate that in my dishes and simplify it, because that is my favorite way to cook, is to be able to break it down, simplify it, make it so that anyone can do it. And by being able to go to those countries and seeing them cook and being invited to the kitchens, it's been amazing. It's way beyond my wildest imaginations. When I'm thinking of cooking something out of a recipe book, I never think, man, I can break this down even simpler. But going to the countries and seeing like someone's grandmother explain to you, well, here's how we wash our rice, and it'd be like, this makes so much sense. I can take this back and teach a 5-year-old how to do this. So it's been amazing.
People want to throw stuff in the microwave and they want now, and they don't. And I know we've talked about this on the show before, but the energetics of the food exchange when you're preparing it and making it with your own hands. I know it's not the best thing to say, but I've gone weeks where I don't want to cook. I don't feel like cooking. I'm exhausted. But once I really get in my groove in the kitchen and I'm breaking up the lettuce or I'm cutting up the celery or the carrots, it's relaxing. Like, it starts to calm me down, and then I enjoy it.
And everyone can taste that love too.
Yeah.
I tell people there's absolutely angry food, and then there's food that you can feel the love in. Like when someone's sitting and they're taking their time, you can feel that love. When it's angry food and someone's like, I just got to put something out really quick, you can taste that too.
Right.
And it happens to the best of us. Like, it happens in the chef world too. Most chefs, they will cook a great meal for someone else, and then they'll, on the way home, grab fast food. And that's what they'll eat. So for most people, chefs, home cooks, if you don't cook at all, I say take one day, whatever your day where you have the most time, do your prep on that day. And then even if you're not making something from scratch every night, you can at least throw something in a pan that you were able to put that love into.
Right.
So that's cool that you go back and you say, you know what, let me reset and get back into the kitchen.
Right.
Because sometimes that does not happen. And there are people who don't touch their kitchens at all.
Oh, I know. And one of the other things that I wanted to ask you was your experience with dealing with a few celebrities and what that's been like.
So grand scheme, I don't think that I realized that I was working with celebrities when I started working with them. I was actually in culinary school on internship, and I started to work with celebrities through my internship, but I was so focused on put out good food. Like, I wasn't thinking, oh my gosh, I'm working with people from the Food Network, or I'm working with celebrities, because I worked at the Lowe's Miami Beach Hotel. So I was there in the wintertime. We had South Beach Food and Wine. We had the Super Bowl that was there. So there's a group there. It's the Who. So the Who's there, and they're staying at the hotel, and they're like, hey, if you can come in, like, we have a really special treat for you. And my dad loves soft rock, and so I grew up on the Who and Yes. And so here I am, like 21, 22, and I walk in and it's the Who, and I'm like, it's the Who. And it was the first time that I was kind of like, I can't believe that I get paid to be in this space. And so I went to culinary school, put my head down, just worked through the industry, and now I find myself back in the kitchen working with celebrities, because when you're good at what you do, people want you to come in and be a professional and provide them with like just a really great experience. So they will seek you out. So I now spend time with a lot of comedians and actors and A-listers. Dave Chappelle lives in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and one of the chefs that I work with, Chef Nikki Stewart, she does a lot with him. She's like his in-house chef. So when I'm with her, we're wherever he is when he is in Ohio. And that's been a pretty cool experience too. For the most part, they're like people who just so happen to have a lot of money. And I would say that working with him, he's very, very kind. And the people around him are kind too. Yeah. So that's a good experience.
And he's a funny guy, so that doesn't hurt either.
He's super funny, but super intelligent. Mm-hmm. Really, really smart. He was teaching me about salt, which was super random, but we were cooking at his house for, I can't remember what it was for, but he was like, Mansa Musa, the reason why he was so famous throughout the world is because he was a salt baron. And then he goes into this whole thing about salt, and I'm like, dude, you're a genius. That's why you make so much sense. So, wow, it's just been incredible.
Right. And speaking of experiences, you've had a lot of different experiences working with a lot of different organizations.
I have. So I do a lot in different spaces. I work with community organizations. I actually do a summer program with ADPS, and we do a lot of cooking. We use STEM, and from that experience, I was able to then take that program and work with a summer camp in New York City this past summer because the kids couldn't really go in person. So we did an online summer camp experience until my computer died, which was terrible. But we went for 4 weeks strong, and then the computer completely was like, we're going classes, now you're doing a virtual summer camp, 2 virtual summer camps. And then this summer coming up, I'm working with a program in China. So I have the kids side of things. I actually work with a lot of organizations in the cannabis space. And so that was its own just whole situation because I'm not a recreational user. And so for me to delineate into that space, people were like, well, what happened? But I believe in food as healing. Mm-hmm. And so my aunt got cancer and she needed something to help stimulate her appetite. So what I do now is I teach people how to use different plants, even cannabis, and I teach them how to use it in a way that's going to help their bodies. So I work with the Cleveland School of Cannabis, and I teach for their program, and I teach people how to incorporate cannabis into their diets as well.
And your diet, you've had to alter and change a little bit because you've had some hurdles of your own.
Yeah. When I was 17, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. Up until that point, I had eaten pretty healthy, but my mom was in the military. She was like just in another country. I think it was Kosovo. And I was eating what I wanted to. I was a teenager. I was pretty much living on my own. We would have people pop into the house, but at 17, you're like, I'm about to be 18. What is an adult going to do here? And so I was working pretty much full-time, in school full-time, tennis team captain, and I was limited on the time that I could spend making food at home. I was very well versed by the time I was 17 on how to cook at home. I just didn't have the time to do it. And so that kind of triggered my immune system to get weakened, and I ended up finding out that I had rheumatoid arthritis. And initially they pumped me with all types of medication, and I was like, I don't want to be a zombie for the rest of my life. And I changed my diet and I got off of every medication. So at 17, I'm walking around and I'm like, guys, through your diet, you can literally change your entire life. And people my age were just like, whatever, we're superheroes. Right. We don't need that information. Right. So I started to work with people in my grandmother's age group and my grandmother. My grandmother switched her diet from eating a lot of pork, a lot of beef, to suddenly my grandmother's making turkey meatloaf, and she's doing she would do boards that were usually a lot of preserved meats and cheeses to now incorporating like different elements to that. Because my grandmother was French classically trained. So she's like, well, let me show you guys in the summertime, we can put all these pops of flavor in that is going beyond just the traditional board. And then I went from there into being able to, when I was in culinary school, like incorporate some of those things into our actual coursework and work in the community. And then when I started to travel, I forgot everything that I used for myself and kind of just started to eat however I wanted to. And last month, I went for routine blood work, just like I do every year. And they were like, yeah, so you need an emergency transfusion. And I was devastated because I had never had to stay in hospital longer than an hour whenever I was getting a checkup done. And I had to stay overnight to get this blood transfusion. And I had to get a subsequent iron infusion because the transfusion didn't raise my iron levels enough. And so now I find myself working again through my diet in order to make sure that I am where I need to be in terms of my blood levels, because when your hemoglobin drops, that means that you're not getting enough oxygen throughout your body. So my doctor initially didn't tell me that like it was as dire as it was, but then he's like, yeah, your organs were pretty much shutting down. And it wasn't because I lacked the knowledge. It was that I just didn't have the time to implement the things that I already knew. So now I'm back to where I was before.
Right, but it's it's not the best reminder, but any of us can fall off the wagon.
For sure.
And being in the field that you're in, I know it's probably pretty hard because you see food all day long. So you probably don't want to cook yourself a meal. You're ready to go home and let someone else cook for you for once.
For sure.
Well, I'm glad that you're here today, and I'm glad that you're healthier. And I think this is a great time to take a nice break. And when we come back, I am going to find out from Chef Barry how to pronounce the charcuterie board. And we're going to have more when we come back. Stick around.
Fairfield Federal. When it comes to our customers and our community, we go above and beyond to help. Our people make the difference.
We were retiring from Tucson, Arizona, and we made a retirement trip out around Ohio, having decided that's where we wanted to be. And we came across this town called Lancaster, and we fell in love with the downtown area where the fountain is and the memorials and the flags and all the stuff. And we looked around and I said, there's our bank right there.
There's something to be said about a community bank in your hometown.
Right. If you live in the community, you should do business in the community as much as possible. So it makes sense to bank with the community bank where you live.
Fairfield Federal is the bank to be at. If you live in this town, or any town actually, you want to bank at a local home bank. And the employees are happy here, they're conversant, customer service is through the roof. There's nothing more you could ask for.
Personal or business banking, whatever you need, we take it seriously because we know you do. Stop by today at any of our 3 locations and see why the difference is clear. Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan specializes in banking that revolves around you.
Member FDIC Equal Housing Lender.
Hey guys, we are back. Healthy Life Designing. Our guest here is the wonderful Chef Barry. We have been talking about a ton of your history, how you got to where you are, and we got to get something figured out here because my husband and I have been trying to figure out how to pronounce the word charcuterie, and it's been a joke even before you and I met. So, can you clarify for me?
I can kind of clarify.
Okay.
So there are plenty of people that say charcuterie. There are plenty of people that say charcuterie. And the long of it is that it's still up for debate. I've spoken to people who are from France and they're like, oh, it's charcuterie. And then you'll speak to someone else and they're like, no, it's charcuterie. So it just, I don't know if it's a regional thing.
Right.
But I've literally spoken to people from France. I spoke to someone when I was in Paris. I've spoken to someone that's from there. And if you ask someone that is on this side of the water, they're definitely going to give you just their interpretation.
Well, yeah, once Americans get a hold of it and sprinkle some slang in there, I mean, you never know what the word's going to come out to be sometimes.
I think if you use one or the other, people usually know what you're saying.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing is that they don't know what it means.
Yes.
So there's that. The term, whether you say charcuterie or charcuterie, it is literally preserved meats. So when we see most boards, it's actually a cheese and charcuterie board, not necessarily a charcuterie board. Charcuterie just means preserved meats.
Okay.
And that's it. So when we go to add the elements of our breads and our crackers and cheeses and our different spreads and fruits and vegetables, that becomes something else completely. So now I just say a cheese and charcuterie board.
Okay.
Instead of the charcuterie board.
I've got knowledge now. So what do you have for us today?
So what I want to do is use some of the elements that most people usually put onto a board and just kind of break down the science of how to create your own board. I'm going to use actual meat today, but there are some people who will not use meat because they're vegan or vegetarian. I'm going to use some elements of preserved items because it's the wintertime, but in the summertime you may swap out our tomato jam for fresh tomato slices, or I have olives, but that may become pickles, or fresh cucumber if it's the summertime. But I try to go with whatever works seasonally. Right now, because it's the winter time, you want a lot of antioxidants. So I have our chocolate-covered cranberries, and I also have some pomegranate and Concord grape jam. And then you want vitamin C, so I have our tomato jam. I have, of course, just a pop of saltiness because some people really love olives. And then I have our tanginess, in that we have some stone ground mustard as well. And then, of course, you have your preserved pieces of meat. We have our pepperoni, our salami, we have prosciutto, we have some sopressata, we have more salami, and then we have just our different cheeses. And I'll break down the science of all of these as well and why I chose the way that I chose.
Okay, so why did you choose this one?
All right, so for the meats, you want to remember a couple of things. You want to remember to have a meat that's going to be more neutral flavor, and that is what we're going to get in our salami, our pepperoni. You want a meat that's going to be more salty, and that's what we're going to get when we're using the prosciutto as well. And then you want different textures. So the reason why we have our prosciutto and our soppressata is because those are going to give us like really delicate flavors, and then our hard salami is going to give us more of a heartiness because we have bread and we have crackers, so we want something to complement each. The soft is going to go with the hard crackers. With our soft bread, you're definitely going to use the hard sausages for that. For the cheeses, I always think the same thing. I think soft, so we have a goat cheese. I think salty for that as well. We have our Parmesan, and I think a more neutral flavor, and we have that in our cheddar cheese. So then once you have that built out, then you add in other elements. Usually you're going to go sweet in some way, shape, or form because you have so much salty. So we have figs. The figs are not fresh because it's not fig season. So we have preserved figs. For someone like me, that's major because it adds a real good boost of iron. So this is going to be great for your iron. We have our preserved jam. Again, it is not that season right now, so it allows us to add sweetness onto our board without necessarily adding on a strawberry or a grape right now, which they may not be sweet because it's the middle of the winter time. And then once we decide if we're going fresh or preserved for our for our fruits, then we're going to go into our spreads. So usually you're going to get a mustard, and that's just, again, to complement our hard cheeses, our neutral flavors, to give it a tanginess. Usually you're going to have some type of either tomato or something that is a mild flavor because, again, you want to offset. And then once you get past that point, then it comes time for the vegetables. For us today, that's going to be represented by our olives. But again, in the summertime or whenever your vegetables are in season, you may add those fresh vegetables in. But just remember seasonality as well when you're doing these boards. It's pretty important because you don't want to have something that's pretty that tastes disgusting.
Right. So then how do you start by beautifying these boards? Like, is there any, like, do you put the meats on first, the cheeses first? How does this go?
So what I like to do, I like to start by just building out the meats first. And I like to do little designs. So for the salami that's going to be larger, I'll take it, fold it in half, make sure that I'm holding the middle of that salami, and then just fold that back over. And I'll do that a couple times and make a line out of that. And what you want to do is alternate this to make sure that it's going to stay in place. So you're just going to continue to do that all the way down.
How cute is that? I never would have thought of that.
And it's super simple.
Yes.
And then next to this meat, what I'm going to do is put whatever cheese or whatever element is going to complement this meat. And since this is a neutral meat, I'm actually just going to go ahead and put some of our Parmesan because it's going to give a sharp flavor.
Okay.
And the Parmesan is sliced thin. You don't want to get a really huge chunk of the Parmesan cheese. So I do little Parmesan triangles, and what I like to do is offset them. Another thing that you're going to want to remember when you're doing your own board is your heights. So if I'm doing a board that's smaller, usually this size or smaller, I'm going to do a lot of flat lays. If I'm doing a board that's larger, then I'm going to want to add some elements that are going to kind of pop out. And so what you want to do is kind of take something like your soppressata or your prosciutto, and you just want to kind of just build up your own thing. I am a fan of anything that looks like a flower. So I always try to make like a little circular flower element and then put something in the middle to hold that down. And really it's just you folding it over until you feel like you're in a flower space.
That is so interesting. I never would have guessed. But it is so easy if you think of just creating a flower.
It's super easy and it looks visually appealing.
Yes.
So I always try to do lines and circles on the board just to capture attention, but also to keep it.
Some balance.
Definitely a balance. So since this is going to be a little saltier, what I'm going to take some fig and I'm just going to cut the figs in half. And I want to show the inside of the figs.
I've never seen the inside of one of those.
Every time you're eating a fig, a bee has literally sacrificed his life for that fig.
Huh.
which is why vegans don't normally consume figs.
Yes.
All right, so I have some hard elements that I'm going to go ahead and put onto my board.
Okay.
We can actually kind of space these out a little bit. What I'm going to do, I'm actually going to take some of our bread and put it next to our pepperoni. And then for our salami, I'm just going to have these be a semicircle, and we'll fill that in. So this is coming together really quickly.
Yeah. Well, and once you've done it a few times and you know what you're doing, it's just, you're done.
The goal is to have fun with it, to not make it cumbersome and not feel like you have to go and do things a certain way. As long as you think lines and circles and just how you're going to fill that in, that is pretty much the most important part. So with my goat cheese, I'm actually going to take that semicircle and I'm going to put the goat cheese in the middle of that. And again, this does not have to be pork that you're using. We're just using this today because we're talking about the tradition behind a board, a charcuterie board or charcuterie, depending on where you're from. But it doesn't have to be like that.
Okay.
All right, and so I'm going to add on some crunch because we definitely want to talk about texture. So I'm just going to go ahead and add my crackers right next to that cheese, giving people options if they want to come from this side or that side.
Yes.
And then after that, with all of your accoutrement that is left over, you can either stop here, which some people prefer for their boards not to be overwhelmed, or you can continue to build. Like, let's say if I was going to go ahead and take some of my olives, I would look for spaces where a pop of green would be great.
Right.
So I would just go ahead and put these on the side.
I'd love to see the art when it's created and how it's created.
It's super fun, super fun. I think that I'm going to leave our spreadables in their actual container,
Okay.
Which is really good when you're thinking about having a large group. That way you don't have to worry about someone saying, oh, well, I'm going to pick some of this up, and if it drops off of their spoon, if they're not using the spoon that you provided. So the spreadables we're going to leave like that, but then I'm going to add some of our chocolate-covered cranberries.
Which I did not know those existed either.
In the wintertime, I try to add a lot of elements that normally you get, like cranberries around this time, the wintertime, but to cover them with chocolate just takes it up a lot.
All right. And can you talk about the different types of boards and maybe the care about, the wooden boards, or is this one a plastic one?
Yep, for sure. So the plastic boards are going to be the least of anyone's concerns.
Okay.
Plastic boards, they can actually, for the most part, either be hand washed or put into your dishwasher. Your board will actually tell you how it should be cared for. When you're talking about a metal board, normally I don't ever put those into the dishwasher. I hand wash them and dry them. The same thing with a wooden board, but with a wooden cutting board, I definitely want to make sure not to ever put that into a dishwasher. And also, I want to make sure that it's dry, like the same day that I'm going to be working with the wooden cutting board, because wood harbors bacteria. So it's very important to wash that with warm soap and water. I'm using a clean dish towel, and I'm super stringent when it comes to that. And then once that's dry, taking either a really clean towel, not a towel that's been used before, or just paper towels, and patting that dry, and then leaving that up on its edges to dry. Then you can store it flat, but you want to make sure that it's dry before it goes in.
Right.
And then every 3 to 4 weeks, I actually treat my wood. So I'll take an oil. You can go to Bed Bath and Beyond and get just a wood oil to put onto there and be able to keep it, preserve it for the long term.
Wow, it's incredible. One other thing that I wanted to ask you real quick was your jars, because I find those are not only so cute, but if you're done with your condiments, you could store it back in the refrigerator, and so you don't waste it. Where could you find those? But then the other thing is, how long would this last after you make a board, and how long can it stay fresh?
The boards, because you're dealing with preserved meats, as long as you don't have elements on your boards that can kind of go bad, the boards can actually last you for a couple of days. I've not ever seen a board last longer than one day, but hypothetically they can last for a couple of days.
Right.
As long as you don't have an element like your bread. Your bread's going to go stale. Your preserved, if you have vegetables or fruit on your board that's preserved, that may go bad a little bit more. And then if you have something like our goat cheese is covered in cranberries,
Right.
That may start to actually just run because the liquid is being released. And of course you have your olives, but if it's just preserved meats and taking off the crackers, taking off the bread, and just leaving the cheeses, for sure you can keep that for a couple of days. You just need to cover it to make sure that it doesn't harden everything.
Gotcha.
And that's why I love these jars.
Yes.
Because the jars, I can literally take the spoon out, close the jar up, seal it, and I'm ready to put that directly into the refrigerator.
Right. Well, that is all that we have time for. Thank you so very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. This is like my favorite thing to do. I get to play with my food, and people, they end up paying me for it.
Yeah.
So, or I can teach kids.
Right.
This is my favorite thing to do with my 18-month-old little cousin. We make charcuterie boards. So Lunchables are out.
It's educational. And if anybody would like to know how they can get your help, could you let everybody know where they can find that information?
So I have a website. It's cheflberry.com, and that will link you to what I'm doing in the community, but also my social media, which I don't know what my social media handles are right now. So go to cheflberry.com and you'll find all the information there.
All right, guys, that is all that we have time for today. Check out Chef Barry. You guys will not regret it. And until next time, we will see you soon.